brief introduction about Dr. Madhu Chennabasappa. Thank you.
I'm extremely honored to introduce Dr. Madhu Chennabasappa, Assistant Professor, Department of Physics, Siddhaganga Institute of Technology, Tumkur, as the resource person for this session. He has completed his PhD and postdoc from ICMCB, University of Bordeaux, France. Dr. Madhu holds excellent academic and research record. He has 2 patents to his credits and has published 21 research papers in reputed international journals. He was a research assistant at Jawaharlal Nehru Center for Advanced Scientific Research, Bangalore, from 2005 to 2009. In addition, he was also a research associate at Advanced Batteries Laboratories, Department of Mechanical Engineering, Colorado State University, USA. His research interest includes materials for energy applications like battery materials, magnetocaloric materials, neutron and synchrotron diffraction, and photocatalytic photocurrent materials. The dedication and diligence Madhu sir have shown to prepare for this session is quite evident as he took efforts to survey the level of understanding of the participants. We are extremely privileged to have you, sir, as a resource person to handle 6 sessions of this FDP on research ethics and characterization techniques in material science. On behalf of Guru Angad Dev Teaching Learning Center of MHRD, SGTP Khalsa College, University of Delhi, St. John's College, Agra, and Bishop Mu College, Mavelikara, I welcome you to deliver a lecture on the topic, Discussion on Construction, Working, and Data Collection Techniques in X-ray Diffraction. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Good morning, everyone. So I think I need to thank all the organizing committee of Department of Physics of Bishop Moore College, because even they have done very tremendous job in the sense when Sajan sir he asked me to be resource person, I thought it would be something like 2030, because most of the workshops I did, it was offline, not online. So this is a new thing that we are doing. So mostly it is 20-30 participants, but now I see it is almost 10 times more. It's good because a lot of people are interested, so it is very nice. At the same time, we have a huge challenge of convincing 200 people. I think to convince 20 people, it used to be a little bit difficult. Now 200 people, I think it's very, very difficult. But still, I will do my best. So as you already know from, so I'm going to stop my video because it is better. So as most of you know that we will be having 6 sessions. So I will try to make it interactive because we are doing hands-on training. It's not just one way. It should not be one way. So that is my view. Okay, so let us have it as interactive. So if I'm going too fast, please let me know, because this is not just you are going to go through some PPTs, right? So you have to learn how you're doing. And actually, I wanted to do such kind of workshop from long back, but this is, I think, Sajan sir and along with his colleagues, they have given very good platform for me. So let us use this platform. I think we need to do that. So I think Sundareshan sir, he has already started. He started something about crystallography, and those things are very important in terms of going forward. And also, like we know, like he couldn't complete everything, so there is something lagging behind. So I had to again reshuffle my slides, because I have to complete some things. Because, if not, there is no meaning for doing retool refinement. So I have changed some slides. Maybe I'll be, so as you know, it will be like 6 sessions. So you don't have to worry about the timetable. We will cover all the things that has been promised. So that I can tell you. Okay. So this is what we are going to do. So next, before starting, I think thank you all for those who have given feedback. So I think maybe I'll just go back to that. Okay, maybe I just will go. Okay. So just to before starting, what I will do is I will just talk a little, maybe 5 minutes about our college, because this college, it was founded by Dr. Sri Shivakumar Swamiji. So uh, he was a pioneer in rural education. So he has established some schools even for blind people and all those things. So it is in Siddhaganga Math. It's very close to uh, Bangalore. So something like 70 kilometers from Bangalore. So he was born in 1907, before independence. So and he left us just in January 2020. Okay. So around he lived around 111 years, and he was active in the sense he was head of this institute which I come from. So Siddhaganga Institute of Technology, it is part of Siddhaganga Math. So he was active from 1930 to 2019. So this is active in the sense he was again a pioneer in education, especially for rural children. So even today in the MUT, so there is around 10,000 students who are given free education, free boarding, and free with free uh, food facility, everything. So even this school is from primary to up to high school. So up to 10th, you have around 10,000 students who are given free education and everything. Okay. So some of this achievement is he got Padma Bhushan in 2015, and before that he was awarded Karnataka Ratna, which is the highest civilian by Karnataka government in 2007. And just to summarize that, uh, this picture, so the picture with our I think most of our favorite, okay, Abdul Kalam ji, and then along with our Swamiji, maybe it was around maybe 12 years before photo this is. So this shows how curious they were even at the age, like in their age. So Swamiji was around uh, more than 90s, and then Kalam was also, he was almost former president. So this is after his he stepped down from the president. So even at that age, they were so much curious. So the same thing should apply for us. So this is what we have to take home. Okay, the take home message is we need to be very curious. So whether the age doesn't matter for our learning. So the reason why I put this is just to make sure. So I was very much happy to see the feedback. So I'll just open the feedback. Maybe I guess everyone can see this. So uh, this is the thing which I shared with you, and then I think I'll go to response. So I got around 198 response. So that shows a lot of you are active, very active. So that is one thing I wanted to make sure. And if you take uh, uh, the number of people here, so I think more than 75%, which is 3/4, is faculties. So and they are so active. So this gives me more energy. I think yes, it's good to have PhD students and UG students, but it is good also to see the faculty taking so much interest. And so this is what I like the most, because the reason of making uh, this workshop is to learn ritual refinement, and so many of you have not done it. So uh, it doesn't matter. Like the main aim is to learn. So I will try to do my best to teach you the things. So then, okay. So this familiarity is the main reason why I gave this. Is you should know at least the basics of crystallography. Then it gives. Uh, it will be easy. My job will be easy. I think more than anything, my job will be easy, because that is one more reason why we had Professor Sundaresan sir. So he is my guru actually because I started my career with him, my research career. So I regard him as my first guru in research. So he has given very good platform. So even I was present as a participant for his talk, entire talk. So I saw like he had covered most of the crystallography part. So now I think this, if I ask the same question, it would go around up to 70. Maybe how familiar you are with the crystallography? Maybe you can go. Your level can be maybe around 70, 75. So that is very good for starting. Okay. So then we had all these questions. So I have just changed some of the things based on your feedback because uh, I would prefer to deliver what you want to learn. So instead of pushing what I know, so in some cases I may not know. I'll try to explain a little bit. So because some people they wanted to learn single crystal data analysis. So this is almost like 30%. So the reason why we cannot do powder diffraction for single crystal. This also I will try to address in my talk. Okay. So I have again rearranged my talk based on your feedback. So this is the one reason I took this feedback. So I don't want to impose something I know because you need to learn what you are interested. So and as you know, it will be 2 days, and it's good like you have one break in between. So I guess I'll go back to my slide. So the course is, as I told, it's not just PPT. So it should be interactive. So it is very difficult to have interaction with 250 or 300 people. Still, what you can do today, I'm going to do some. We will cover some concepts, and they have also have. You are also going to have assignment and quiz. So quiz you can submit, but assignment you have to perform yourself, and then you have to send back some files. So then I know how much you are getting. So tomorrow is a holiday for you. In terms we don't have any sessions, so you can utilize this time to practice whatever we are going to cover today. Okay. The same thing applies for Monday. So Monday I am going to again show you some analysis techniques. So after that, again you will have a quiz and assignment. So you have to try yourself for these assignments, and don't worry like if you are stuck in between, you can always send email to me or anything. So I will give you the email and all my contact. So even after the workshop, you can give me you can send me your queries. Okay. So with this, I think we'll go to our presentation. So this is the flow. So this will little bit change based on our priority. So so first thing is why you need X-ray diffraction. X-ray diffraction is like a super microscope. So this is the word that is normally used by Guru Rao sir at IISc. So because super microscope you need to see the objects which are beyond our experience. So if the object is very very small, then what you do, you just take it to under a microscope, optical microscope, or any even your lab microscope, and then what you can do, you can zoom it and see. So this microscope actually helps you to see the objects which are beyond your experience. Okay. So now uh, how to see an atom, because atom, the size of atom is around 10 raised to minus 10. So in angstroms. So how to see that atoms? Again, you need a microscope. So microscope again, you need. So most of your from physics background. So there is a basic equation or basic condition that to have a diffraction or a reflection, the size of the object should be almost equal to the wavelength of the light. Okay. So here when you are talking about some microscopic objects like a bacteria or something like that, so the size is around 10 raised to minus 6, and then you can use a laser light which will have some zero point 0.6 or zero point 0.3 zero point 0.4 micrometers of wavelength, and then you can see those objects. But when it comes to atoms are even smaller, like so 10 raised to minus 10. So I cannot use a laser light. If I use a laser light, I cannot get a diffraction because the wavelength of a laser light is much, much higher compared to the size of the atoms. So in this case, you should have a light which is of the order of, or which is having a wavelength of the order of your atoms, which is your scattering center. Okay. So that is why we are going to use X-rays. X-rays will have a wavelength around 1.7 to 2, close to 2 angstroms. Okay, so that we will again cover one by one. Okay, so that is the reason why we call it as a super microscope. Super microscope is beyond a microscope. Okay, so it is better than a microscope by using your X-rays. Okay, so now, so this is again just electromagnetic spectrum. I think most of you know this. So this, it just compares the wavelength with some objects. Okay, so building are in the range of 10 raised to 3, which is the wavelength of your radio waves, and then we have you have microwaves, infrared waves. So this is just to show the comparison. So when you come to X-rays, so X-rays are having the wavelength of X-rays is around 10 raised to minus 10. So if you take these X-rays, so they can actually distinguish the atoms because their wavelength is almost similar to those of the atoms. Okay, so X-ray are the light with the far smaller wavelength that are far away from visible region, and hence they can indirectly. But anyhow, we cannot see the X-rays because they're very difficult to. We cannot see X-rays. Laser light we can see, maybe if it is falling on something. But when it comes to X-rays, we cannot see them because it is beyond our ability. Okay. So for this, what you need some indirect devices such as detectors, like a photo detector or something like that, which can see and feel it. Okay. So for that, we are going to use some detectors. So now, anyhow, so for now, what we'll do is, if you take the our periodic table, and if you see the atom size, so the size of each atom is not the same. For example, if you take potassium, it is 2.03. If we go for chromium, it is 1.39. For copper, it is 1.32. So you can see the size of atoms is completely different from one atom to other atom. So this is where the laser can distinguish them based on the spot size. So this will be like your scattering center. So nickel will be a scattering center, or carbon is a scattering center, or maybe your lanthanum is a scattering center. So this is how your X-rays can distinguish each atom. Okay, so each element has distinct atomic size. So in this way, this will help us to get the information about a given atom. So we cannot distinguish X-ray, sorry, the atoms, but X-rays can distinguish the atoms. Okay, so this is the starting point. So, or this is a very basic concept of your X-ray diffraction. Okay, again we are using the very basic principle of your physics, that if I want to have a diffraction, then the wavelength of light has to be almost same of the order of the your obstacle. So obstacle in the sense, here each atom would be a obstacle. Okay, so that we'll see again. Okay, so now this is again, I just gave a scale factor. So if you see, some people were asking some questions yesterday, so I just thought I will just give this this, I will show this. So you can see what is the in terms of your crystallite size and all those things. Okay, so if you take X-rays, they are having they can distinguish between something around 100 micrometer up to maybe some hundreds of nanometers. Okay, so this is hundreds of nanometers, almost or maybe 10 nanometers, because it is again depends on the uh, size. Okay, so then when it comes to, if you want to see some atoms and all those things, then you cannot use again X-rays. You should go again for electrons, which are much smaller. Okay, so this is just to show what are the things that your X-ray can distinguish. Okay, so from, if you use your eye, normal eye, you can see the assemblies. Assemblies in the sense, whatever in 10 meters, or maybe up to 10 millimeters. Okay, 10 millimeters is almost like 1 centimeter, maybe less than that, maybe 1 millimeter. You can distinguish up to some, depending on your eyesight. So you can distinguish between each of these things. Okay. So then, if you want to go see smaller than some 100 micrometers, then you should go for optical microscopy. Optical microscopy will have lower wavelengths. So this is like your lasers. You are going to use different lasers. So then you can see up to maybe 1 micron size, or depending on, even now you have very good optical microscopes, high-end microscopes, which can actually distinguish even smaller particles. Okay, and then you have your X-rays, and then you have your scanning electron microscope, TM, your transmission electron microscope. So when it comes to these things, your electron will be the light, okay, or the probe, the probing source, okay. So, and if you want to go for subatomic, atomic is already 0.1 or 1 nanometers, so 10 around 10 angstroms or 1 angstrom. So when it comes to less than that, then you should go for particle accelerators, which will be like again high-end experiments. Okay, so this is how you can actually distinguish these things. So if you ask me if anyone has seen atoms, maybe it's still a question mark. Okay, so it's very difficult. So because to stabilize a single atom itself is a big challenge, and then you want to see the atom, so it is slightly trivial. Okay, so this is your scale factor. Okay, so now we'll see what happens. So what are the different diffractions which will happen? Okay, so if I send my X-rays on any object, what are the possibilities? So object has several atoms, right? So if you take any object, that means it is just a collection of some Avogadro number of atoms. So now if you send this X-rays, it can pass through it. It is like if you send a light to a glass. So if you take a put a glass, and if you shine some light, what happens? The light can just transmit, so it can pass through the glass. Then what are the other things? It can also, the second thing is, it can also have a reflection or diffraction. So if you have if the glass is very well polished, then what happens? You can have a reflection, and also it can have some diffraction. So these things you again learn in your physics. So this is all basic physics. So same thing is what we are going to apply in case of understanding the crystallography. Okay, so this is the basic thing, and then how to explain this? So use by using your very well-known Bragg's equation. Okay, Bragg's law. So this Bragg's law was given by Sir William Henry and also Lawrence Bragg. Okay, so Henry Bragg and Lawrence Bragg. So these are again father and son who had actually given this theory of Bragg's diffraction, okay, or Bragg's law. So what does this Bragg's law say is that when you there are two lines. So this is the first line of X-ray. This is the second line of X-ray. So this is similar to your Young's double slit experiment. Okay, so what you do is you put two slits, and then what you do, you just shine a light which actually diffracts, and if each of these slits, if you have, as you have two slits, these two slits will act as a again a new source of light. Okay, and when the light which is coming from each of these slits, when they interfere, they can interfere either constructively or destructively. So if they interfere constructively, you get a bright band, or which is nothing but it is a constructively means you get a bright band, and if they interfere destructively, then that means you are losing the intensity, so you get a dark band. Okay, so the same thing is with your in case of your diffraction. Okay, so in case of your diffraction, so actually I'm not shown here. So this point which is here, this point is an atom. This should be an atom, and then the point O, which is marked O, is also an atom. Okay, so you shine light. So there is two rays of light. The first ray of light is hitting the first atom on the first top surface, and the second ray of light is is hitting the second atom, which is in the position of O. Okay, so this light is nothing but it is the X-ray. So because we need to satisfy the condition. Okay, so for that we are going to have X-rays. Okay, so X-ray has 1.54 angstroms. So again, if I just go back just for your information. So if I take something like chromium or manganese or nickel in my sample, so their size is almost 1.24 or 1.53 or 1.6 angstroms, right? So now you're satisfying the condition for diffraction, so you'll have the diffraction. Okay. So now, when do you get a constructive interference? When do you get a destructive interference? So you get constructive interference only when the angle of incidence is equal to angle of reflection. Okay. So this is your Bragg angle. So when you have Bragg angle, when the condition is angle of incidence is equal to angle of diffracted beam, then only in that case you get a constructive interference. In rest of the case, it is just a destructive interference. So when you have destructive interference, that means there is no light. Light in the sense, this light is nothing but it is again the X-rays. So because you are sending X-rays, so the X-ray is getting diffracted. So if you have constructive interference, that means X-ray is coming at this end. Okay. So if it is destructive interference, that means these two will interfere destructively, and there is no light or no X-ray. Okay. So you have to remember this Bragg's law, because this is the very basic equation for your X-ray diffraction. Okay. So the pair of this Henry and Lawrence, they got Nobel Prize in 1915 for proposing this equation. Okay. Fine. So now this is what it happens. Okay, the two rays of X-rays are coming. They are interfering with, or they are getting diffracted by this atoms. Okay. So now, how to? There are some terminologies which we need to remember. Okay. So I think I just skipped this. So there is something called as DHKL. Okay, DHKL. HKL is nothing but your Miller indices. So this is nothing but your lattice planes. Okay, so this is something which Sundaresan sir could not complete. Okay, so I will try to explain this before going to my part. Okay, so this DHKL is nothing but this is the lattice spacing. Lattice spacing is nothing but this is the distance between two planes of atoms. Okay, so we have one plane of atom. I think it's clear here. Okay, so if you take the first row, so this is one layer of atom. There is second layer of atom. There is then third layer of atom, fourth layer of atom. Okay, so the distance between these two layers is what we call as the D spacing. The spacing between two crystallographic or atomic planes. Okay, so this again, when it comes to if you have studied your crystal structure, so then you know there are some crystal planes. Okay, so if you take the simple cubic, so then again you need to have ABC parameters. Okay, so the ABC parameters is nothing but is your unit cell parameter. Okay, or it gives the dimension of the unit cell. So if you take simple cubic, then what happens? A equals B equals C, because it's all sides are equal. So in this case, you can just write A. Okay, so that is your distance between any two planes. Okay, so now if you take the two neighboring planes, so there is something called 100 plane, then there is something called 110, 111. These are the different planes. So how to get these planes is by again your you have to learn a little bit about the crystal structures. Okay, so if you see here, if I consider the x-axis, so if I take this is okay, just let me. So if I have x-axis, this is your A parameter. If I have take y-axis, if I take this is my B parameter, and if I take my z-axis, which is your C parameter. Okay, So for cubic, A is equal to B is equal to C. So if I put some unit cell, then what happens? This distance is equal to A. Okay. So now when I say 100 plane, that means I'm going to consider only the x-axis. Okay. So this again you would have studied in your crystal structure. So most of you are from physics. So I would assume that you know this little bit about crystal structure. Okay. So whatever you are seeing here 100, it is nothing but it's your Miller indices. Miller indices H, K and L. HKL is nothing but it is the inverse of your intercept. Okay, so this is what you normally know. So U by A and then V by B and then W by C. So these things what do you do and then you get this 100. Okay, so 100 means it is again x-axis, y-axis and z-axis. Okay, so again A, B, C. Okay, so these are your terms. Okay, so now if you take this 100, that means your A is present. Okay, A is 1. Okay, B is 0, and then sorry, this is actually your HKL. Okay, HKL is 100. Okay, so if I want to go to your ABC, then it is 1 by 1, which is 1, 1 by 0, which is infinity, and then 1 by 0, which is again infinity. Okay, 1 infinity infinity. So this will be your lattice parameter. Okay, for this plane. So that means you're not having any contact with the B axis and C axis. Okay, so in the first case, so then it becomes 100 plane. The same thing if I put 200 plane, for example, 200, then what happens? 1 by 2, okay, then you have 1 by 0, and then it is 1 by 0. Okay, if I take unit cube means A is equal to B is equal to C. Okay, so in this case, what happens? Your A will be 1.5, and then B will be infinity, and C is infinity. That means you are not going to touch your B and C axis. So what you do, if I want to uh, if you want to have 200 Miller plane, then what I have to do, I put a point at 0.5 on my x-axis, only x-axis, because I don't have to touch the y-axis. Then if I join all these points, what I get is, sorry, I'm not good in this. Okay, so we'll try. Okay, so if I take this plane, then it is your 200 plane. Okay, so this is how you get your Miller planes or Miller indices. So this was supposed to be this I think Sundaresh sir wanted to cover this, but anyhow uh, due to time there was a little less time, so he couldn't cover. So this is your 200, and then the other one was 100. In the same way, if I want to have 111, then the same thing. You have to use the same exercise. Okay, you take 111, then it will be 1 by 1. So 1 by 1 is 1 by 1, 1 by 1, and then 1 by 0. So this will be like 1, 1, and infinity. Okay, so in this case, you have to have only x and y. Z you don't have to you don't have to touch the z direction. Okay, so if I take this now, what happens? I'm putting 1 on the x-axis. So then 1 on the y-axis, and then I get this kind of a plane. Okay, why these things are important is, as we know, DHKL is nothing but it is the uh, distance between two planes. Okay, crystallography planes. So if I take D100, D100, that means it is the distance between these two planes. Okay, so if I take the distance between these two planes, that is nothing but D100. What is this D100? This is nothing but it is the lattice parameter. If you want to say it is the lattice parameters, nothing but it gives a description of the your unit cell. Okay, so if I take this unit cell and if I want to know what is the dimension of this, then I need to just find this. Okay, so if it is a simple cubic, then what happens? So, D100 is equal to your D010, and this is also equal to D001. Okay, so because all sides are equal, then what happens? You can just write D001 is equal to D010, D100, and this will be equal to A. So this is the main concept that we are going to study here. Okay, so if I just a minute. Okay, so I'll just go here. Okay, so if I know this DHKL, that means if I know the DHKL, the D spacing, that means I know the unit cell, the dimension of the unit cell. Okay, so this is what this is about your Miller indices. So for simple cubic, it is very easy. But as you go for lower symmetry, like your BCC, FCC, or tetragonal orthorhombic, then it becomes a little bit complicated. Okay, but only takeaway message is just these lattice lattice parameters are derived from the DHKL values. Okay, so that is the take home message. So let me see. So this BCC is again, sir has already covered this. Okay, so you have atom which is in the already in the one more atom which is in the center of this cube. Okay, then you get a different set of Miller indices. Okay, okay. So just for your understanding, we will going to stick. We will just again see only uh, about the simple one, which is your NaCl. NaCl is nothing but your sodium chloride. Okay. So if I take sodium chloride, then what happens? As I already explained in the previous case. Okay. So you have 100 here, this plane, and if I take 200, then it will be somewhere in the middle. Okay. In the same way, if I want to take if I have 110 is if this is the 110 plane, then if I take the 220 plane, then this will be just half of that. Okay, so it will be somewhere. So this plane is your 110, and this will be 220. Okay, so these are just about the your planes. Okay, so the same thing for different again 200 plane. Okay, so 200 plane in case of your NaCl crystal, if I take, then this is what you see, and if I take 220 plane for NaCl, then this is the these are the some of the planes. Okay, so okay, so now what happens? So as I told, if you send two ray of X-rays, so the two X-rays, then what happens? They're going to interfere with atoms, and if you get constructive diffraction, then it gives some DHKL values. Okay, so in that case, what I get? I get the distance between these two planes. Okay, so now if I take the NaCl crystal, okay, so you take a NaCl crystal, then you send X-rays. Okay, so I'm sending one X-ray which is actually coming here, and then it is going to get diffracted from the first layer, and then second ray of X-ray which is coming on the coming and getting diffracted from the atom which is in the second layer. Okay, so now what happens? If they get constructive, so for constructive interference, your angle of incidence should be equal to angle of reflection. Okay, so d I is equal to theta I is equal to theta r. Okay, so in that case, what happens? Only in that case you get a light in your detector. Okay, the same thing is shown here. Okay, if I just take NaCl crystal, and if I just do a scan, X-ray scan, that means I'm sending X-rays, I'm changing the angle of incidence, that is your theta I. Okay, so I'm taking theta I, different theta I, so correspondingly you have theta r. So when you take your XRD pattern, you will see it is always 2 theta, not theta. It is because you are taking both angle of incidence and angle of reflection. Okay, both are changing. So this again I will explain when it comes to the working of your X-ray diffractometer. Okay, so you don't worry about that. So only thing what I'm doing, I'm just telling is I'm just doing a scan. So I'm changing the angle of incidence, then correspondingly angle of reflection, and I'm going to take I'm going to collect the data. So as we know already, only for angle of incidence equals angle of reflection, you get a constructive interference. If they are not equal, then what happens? It is destructive interference. Destructive interference means there is no X-ray. X-ray means there is no light. So you are keeping a photo detector here. So if you see the this cycles per second is nothing but it is the number of photons or photons which are entering the detector. Okay. So if you keep changing this, what happens is for NaCl crystal, the constructive interference for 200 plane will occur at are exactly around 31 degree and 30 seconds. Okay, so around 30, 31 degree 2 theta. Okay, so this is for DHKL plane. Then what happens? You keep changing the angle of incidence. Maybe at certain point of time, what happens? Your 220 will is going to get constructive interference. Then you get a peak corresponding to your 220. So this is how you get the diffraction pattern in your X-ray diffractometer. Okay, for powder X-ray diffractometer. Okay, so this is very basic of your X-ray diffraction. Okay, how you get X-ray diffraction? How do you get your all these peaks? Okay. So if it is fine, then I can go. So if you have any doubt, you can ask me. I don't know. Maybe someone can help me. I'll chat.
So we don't have any questions till now.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you can proceed.
Okay. Okay. Fine. Fine. Okay. So this is the very basic thing. I think Sundareshan sir wanted to you wanted to cover these things, but due to shortage of time, he couldn't cover. Even I'm not going in depth because crystal structure itself is like a very huge topic. Okay, so I'm just it's like cherry picking. Okay, so cherry picking in a sense, so I'm just telling whatever is necessary for you. Okay, and I'm just trying to make it easy for myself and also easy for you guys. Okay, so.
Sir, sorry
Hmm,
to interrupt you. We have one question from Vijesh.
hmm.
D001, D010, D100. Can you explain how it is equal to A?
Okay, 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 fine. Okay, so what I was trying to explain here is if it is a simple cubic, this is not the same for your BCC. Okay, in case of BCC, then this equation would be a little bit different. Okay, so if you take your simple cubic thing, then what happens is as you can see already here. So in simple cubic, you have atoms only in the corners, right? So if I just want to write, just I will try to get rid of this. Okay, so let me write again. Okay, so I think so. If I have a this is your unit cell, right? So if this is your unit cell, then what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to just write a one single unit cell. So this okay. So this is your x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis. So as I explained in the previous case. So this is my A parameter. If I take this is this point, this is A. If I take this point, this is B. And if I take this point, this is C. Okay. So if it is a cubic, then what happens? A is equal to B is equal to C. So I don't have to repeat all the time A, B, C. Instead, everything is A. Okay. So if I take your tetragon, then what happens? A is equal to B, but it won't be equal to C. Okay. So in that case, it will be slightly different. So I'm just trying to convince you that how to get a lattice parameter. Okay. So so now if I take a simple cubic, then what happens? You have atoms on the corner. All the corner you have the atom. This is your unit cell. So this is your atom. Okay. So now if you want to plane, if you want to sketch the plane 100, then as it is shown here, this would be a 100. Okay. So this is what I do. I just rotate it by 90 degree. Then what happens? This will go up. Okay, as I shown in the so in this case, okay, so instead of 200, let us assume this is 100. Okay, so this is 100 and this is maybe 200. This is 300. Okay, because unit cell it is just representation. Okay, you can put if you take your crystal structure, crystal structure is nothing but it is if you take a single crystal or any crystal structure, it is nothing but it is the motif motif plus your what is the other one? Motif is your atoms plus your unit cell. Okay, so if you take your units, sorry, if you just repeat your unit cell more times, then what you get? You get a single crystal, which is your crystal structure. Okay, so this is one unit cell. If I put one more unit cell here, and I can put one more unit cell here, so then I can put 3 unit cells in x-axis. Same way, I can put 3 unit cells in y-axis. Then it becomes a big crystal. Okay, if your crystal is nothing but it is repetition of your unit cell. Okay, now if I take this, okay, so if I take this, then what happens? This is 100, and then this is 200, then this is 300. So you can call anything, okay? Or I can call this is 100, 200, 300. Okay, it is just for your convenience. Okay, so because everything is identical, you can give anything as any one of them as the origin. Okay, so you can take any one of them origin, and then you can give the numbers. So now if I know the distance between these two, that is nothing but DHK. Okay, so as it is a simple cubic and we are talking about only 100 plane or 200 plane, then what happens? This would just give the uh, A parameter. Okay, if it is tetragonal, then what happens in that case? You have to see again whether it is A direction or B direction or C direction. Okay, in tetragonal it is A is equal to B. So if you are in 100 plane or 010 plane, then this would correspond to A. If you are in a 001 plane, then this should correspond to C parameter. Okay, so this is just how you get the lattice parameters. Okay, if I know the distance between two planes, that means I'm talking about the lattice parameter. Okay, so this it is very easy to explain for a simple cubic, but as you go far away from simple cubic, as you decrease the symmetry, then what happens? This would become more complicated. Okay, so so this is about your HKL. Okay, and then how it is related with your lattice parameter. Okay, so now if you take this sodium chloride, which is your cubic crystal, so then A is equal to B is equal to C. So if I know this HKL, and you already know the Bragg's law, n lambda is equal to 2d sin theta. Okay, 2d sin theta. So now you can use this equation, and what is your lambda? Lambda is the wavelength of your X-rays. So if I am using copper radiation, then it is 1.54. It is constant. Okay, and we are talking about the first order diffraction. So so this is your lambda is 1.54 angstrom. Okay, and n is equal to 1 for first order diffraction. Then what happens? You know the theta from your graph. It is 31 point something. What you get is your d value. So d value is nothing but if I know d value, I know the lattice parameter. Okay, so this is how you get the lattice parameter from X-ray diffraction. So this is again very basic physics. So you don't have to. This is nothing very hard physics. So now this, if you are convinced with this, then I will go to the next one. Okay. So if
Sir, we have few more questions from the participants. Would you like to take it now or?
Yes. So it's fine.
Okay. From Muthukumar, we have one question. They are parallel rays, parallelly coming and parallelly going out. Why should they interfere?
Why should they interfere? It depends on how they are incident. If your angle of incidence is, you see, this is the same thing. If you just take, for example, simple example of glass. Okay, if you take a glass, if you shine it exactly 90-degree, then you have more transmittance. Okay, but if you give some angle to this uh, angle of your incident ray, then what happens? You have scattering, you have reflection, you have diffraction, all those things. Okay, the same thing happens in case of your rays. Okay, so when you are taking this ray, for example, whatever you are saying on this screen, these two planes are parallel. But if I change the angle of incidence, then what happens? These two planes won't be in the same position to the incoming X-rays. It will look same for us because we are sitting in front of the computer. But when it comes to the X-rays or ray of light, they won't have the same angle of incidence for the first plane and the second plane. So in the first case, what happens? It may go the ray of light can. So for example, if I take this, so the ray of light is going like this. In the second case, what happens? It may not have the one more exactly. There may not be atom exactly below this. So in that case, what happens? It may be slightly tilted here. Okay. So in this case, what happens? It is traveling more distance here. Okay. So in that case, you cannot have constructive interference. So because for constructive interference, again, the path traveled by your light. Okay. So for constructive interference, you know that n lambda, right? So n lambda by 2. So this is your condition for constructive interference. Again, very basic optical physics. Okay. So if they are not in the same position, okay. So if I tilt this, for example, if I tilt this entire plane, well, in that case, what happens? They will not satisfy this condition. Okay. For the constructive interference, the path difference of two light, it won't satisfy the condition for constructive interference, then you cannot have the light. Okay, so that is the destructive interference. Okay, even though they are coming parallel, but it also matters at what point they are having a diffraction. Okay, so if it's not in the same position, same time, then you'll have path difference. Okay, so next you can
Okay,
go to
sir. Next question from Ramya. In XRD, X-ray is scattered from atoms or atomic planes.
So atom is the scattering center. So as you see here, this red point is the atom. So, but in principle, it is plane. We are talking about the planes because I should have two parallel planes. If it is not parallel, if it is slightly shifted, then I cannot have the constructive interference. So it is atom is the scattering center. So that is why we are using X-rays. Instead of that, I can, if it is just atomic plane, then I can use laser. Laser will not give you the diffraction, mainly because you are not satisfying the basic condition of wavelength of light is not equal to the obstacle in the sense here it is atoms. Yes, madam. We can go to next.
Okay, sir. What is the effect of different size atoms in a same plane?
Different size atoms. See, now if I have different size of atoms, for example, in this case, okay. So, I don't know what, yes, okay. So if I increase the size of this atom, for example, then what happens? This D is going to change because you cannot put. If I'm putting some 2 mm ball in a box, I cannot put 5 mm ball in the same box, right? Then what happens? The size, I need to increase the size of the box. So now what happens? Your D is going to increase. If I increase the size of the ball, then or if I increase the size of the atom, then what happens? This D is also going to increase, right? That means your A parameter is going to increase, or your B parameter is going to increase, or C parameter is going to increase. Okay, so this is how you can actually distinguish the so your the unit cell parameter actually depends on what is the atom sitting there. Okay, if I put small atom, then your A is going to be shrinking, right? You don't need a big space. If I put bigger atom, then what happens? Your A is going to increase. So this is related with your lattice parameter. So it is very good question. So thanks for whoever asked. So next one, you can go for next one. Hello.
Sir, you can continue now.
Okay, okay. So you can. I think we will take questions in between. So it is good. Like, so there are very nice questions. So I liked it. So please feel free to ask the question. Okay. So now we will go into the how to get this X-ray diffraction. Okay. So whatever I am showing here, this is very old X-ray diffractometer. Okay. So if you see this, this is a lead box. It is like a tiffin box. Okay, very simple, but very big tiffin box. Okay. So here, why you are taking lead? Lead because it absorbs your X-rays. Okay. Even if you take your modern diffractometers, your X-ray should not come out of your diffractometer. How to make sure it is not coming out of the diffractometer? You put an absorber. Okay, so absorber is your lead. So if you take your doors of your diffractometers, they are almost coated with some lead, and even the inner thing, it is coated with some highly absorbing material. Okay, so this box or this circle is just a box. Okay, it's like a tiffin box. Okay, round tiffin box. So it is made of lead. The reason lead is it is absorbing most of the X-ray. So the X-ray should not come out because they are carcinogenic, or it can even cause cancer. Okay, so this is the box. What they used to do before. Now this is, I'm not talking about recent things. This is about your old X-rays. They used to put a film, your photo film on this. Okay, so this kind of films they used to put on this. So if you know the old cameras with rolls, that kind of rolls they used to just wrap it here, and then they used to close this. So before closing, they used to put a sample here, whatever crystal they want to study. For example, if they want to study the NaCl crystal, then they used to put NaCl crystal in the middle. And if you see this, this is your X-ray. Okay, so X-ray is coming out from here, and it used to fall on the sample. Then this is just a beam stopper because you're sending very high energy X-rays. It should not come out of that. So this is just a blocking. Okay, so blocking X-ray blocking unit. Okay. Then what used to happen based uh, on the orientation used to get a different diffraction. Okay, so this is just a schematic representation of your the same thing. Okay, so you have your X-rays which is coming from here. It is going to fall on your sample. Okay, so then what happens? You have diffraction at different angles based on the satisfying your Bragg's law. Okay, so this was called as a Debye-Scherrer camera. So previously they used to call this kind of setup as a Debye-Scherrer formula. Sorry, Debye-Scherrer camera. Okay, because Debye and Scherrer they had designed this. Okay, so now you can see here there are different colors, right? There is one which is almost in this very fluorescent green, and then fluorescent pink. Okay, so this would the reflection which would be coming from, for example, 100. Okay, and then there is second peak, so our second Debye cone, which can be coming from 001 peak. Okay, so 001 plane. Okay, so if you see this, they are at different angles. Okay, so this is your diffraction angle. So previously it was very tedious. So if you what they used to get is, if they take out what they used to do, you put the sample, you close the lid, you shine the X-rays for maybe some 3-4 hours, and then what happens? So it will keep collecting the light. Okay, so you're getting diffraction only at certain angles. So then what happens? You get some markings here. Okay, so these are the markings which are made by the X-rays on the photofilm. So you take out this film, and if you develop it, what happens is you could see something like this. Okay, you have lines at different points. Okay, so this is your entry point, so which correspond to this point, and this is the exit X-ray exit, which would correspond to the second one. Okay, so you would get actually two identical uh, films. Okay, so I'll just okay, so what you used to get is something like this. Okay, so this is what you used to see on a film. Then what they were supposed to do, they I think maybe if someone has done uh, solid state physics, they would have taken this kind of photo film. Then they would have taken the distance from the center point to this. Okay, and then the center point, the distance from here to here, then they would have used some formula to get the D100 or D001. Okay, so if I take this is your 100, then you would have calculated D100. If I take this is 001, and if I consider this sample is a tetragonal, then what happens is go to B. Okay, so from your first peak you could get the A and B parameters. From the second one you could get the C parameter. So this is how you could have calculated the ABC parameter from using a film. I don't know how many I have done. We used to do it in our in our MSc, because during my MSc I had I was a solid state physics as a specialization, and we had one paper which was on crystallography. Okay, crystallography, it used to cover all those things about the crystal structure. Okay, so whatever sir talked about yesterday and whatever I started talking today morning, and this X-ray diffraction, all these things would be in one paper. Okay, so now we are trying to cover all those things in 2 days. So it is okay. So okay, fine. So this is the older version. Okay, so now uh, the difficulty was you need very high level of expertise, because you have to just take a photo film and then you have to develop it and you have to do a lot of calculation, and you don't know what is a symmetry, whether it is a cubic, again in cubic, whether it is a simple cubic, whether it is a face center cubic, or whether it is a body center cubic. So it is very difficult. So it was very tedious to solve this kind of structures. It would take minimum of 15 days to 1 month. Okay, so and then every new experiment you need a new photographic film, and these films were a little bit costly in some sense. Okay, so that is the reason it was very difficult. Okay, but now we don't have to do that. Okay, so we have modern things. I will show it later. So other than diffraction, okay, so I told in the first starting thing I showed very nice animation that you send X-ray. When it hit the object, you have transmission or you have reflection and diffraction. Okay, but it's not simple. Okay, so it's not that simple. If you take any light, if you shine it on any object, there is reflection, there is diffraction, there is transmittance. Along with that, there is something called as scattering. Okay, X-ray scattering in this case. Okay, so again, when it comes to scattering, there is coherent scattering and incoherent scattering. This is just for your information. It's nothing related with our workshop or anything we are going to do. Okay, just this is just for your information. So coherent scattering, you can do what we call as a small angle X-ray scattering. So this would give more information about the crystal, your structural information, especially the atomic and molecular level. Okay, so this is at the lower level. Okay, so not just unit cell, but you can also get information about the atomic and molecules. Okay, so by doing your SAX or PDF. PDF is your pair distribution function. Again, this uses the scattering data. Incoherent scattering, this is used to do your imaging. Okay, for example, if you want to do single molecular imaging, this is where you're going to use incoherent scattering. Okay, so X-rays. Okay, so next, what are the other things? You can also get something called as fluorescence. Okay, so if you shine X-rays, for example, if you take copper X-ray and if you shine it on an iron sample, this iron sample is going to give a lot of fluorescence. Okay, so this fluorescence or absorption, because whatever light you send, you won't get 100% transmittance or 100% reflection or 100% fluorescence. This X-ray is also be getting absorbed by the material. Okay, or you can also, if you send sufficiently high energy X-rays, you can also have emission of electron emission. Okay, so by using these things, what you can do is you can study the different some other properties like your elemental analysis. For example, you are doing X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy. The same thing, you send a very high energy X-rays. This X-ray is going to knock out the electron which is in the outermost shell, and you can know whether it is iron, whether it is cobalt or nickel or manganese or titanium, whatever it is. Okay, so because each element will have different emission energy. Okay, so based on that, you can identify what kind of material this is. Okay, so this is what you are doing in XPS. Okay, mostly. In some case, you are going to use local structure. This is again X-ray absorption spectroscopy. So if you know something like X-ray absorption spectroscopy, there you are going to use this. Again, X-ray fluorescence. There is something called X-ray fluorescence. This is again used to find the elements. What kind of element is present in a given material? Okay. If you take unknown material, you just go. If you don't know the composition of your material, then you can do this kind of experiments. Okay, you can do either EDAX or XPS to know what are the elements. So XPS is again, it can also give the coordination. Coordination in the sense whether if I know I have iron, but whether iron is in 2 plus or 3 plus or 4 plus. How do you know? By doing your XPS. Okay, XPS can help you in identifying this your states, oxidation state. Okay, some people may ask this question. Okay, so what is diffraction is giving? Diffraction is giving more about the unit cell, not about anything about the element present. Okay, so if you want to know the element present, then you should go for different techniques. Okay, so these are different techniques. So then there is something called as transmitted light, transmitted beam. So this is your TEM. So if you want to do your high resolution imaging, then you are going to use your transmitted beam, okay, X-ray, your electron beam or X-ray beam. Okay. So then I just going to show this uses of your X-rays. Okay. So in this case, you may ask what are the you are seeing different X-rays. You're seeing X-ray in your lab. You are seeing X-ray in some scanning centers. You are seeing X-rays in some orthopedic surgeons, and also you see some X-rays in airport. Okay, so what is the difference between these X-rays? These X-rays are, they are having different energy. Okay, if you take the X-ray which is we are using in your labs, this will be around 2 to 4 kilo electron volts. So they are very low power. But if you go for scanning, like for example, your chromatography scanning, your bones, then you would go around 20, 30 kilo electron volts, or maybe even higher. Okay, maybe 50 kilo electron volts. Okay, but when you go for airport, then your X-ray has to penetrate high depth. Then what happens? You need to go for higher energy. If you have more energy, then it can penetrate. So as you go from low energy to high energy, so then you can also have more risk, because X-ray is carcinogenic, so you can also have more risk. Okay, if you have high energy X-rays, they can damage your cells or something like that. That is how you get cancer. All those things. Okay. So someone wants to ask question. Some question. I will stop at after just 20 minutes. Okay. Let me finish these things. I will stop at 11:30. Then I can take some questions. Okay. Because we need to rush, because there is some backlog between even from the previous one. Okay. So I will answer your question. Don't worry. Okay, so now someone was asking again about your electron diffraction. So that is so I had put this just yesterday. So after Sundarshan sir talk, I have put this. So X-ray. So these are the difference. Okay, X-ray, electron diffraction, and neutron diffraction. What are the differences? Okay, so if you take the X-rays, so there why they are what is the difference? Okay, so these are they can distinguish between the atomic planes. So these are the diffraction from atomic planes. Okay. So and again, depending on interference, you can have either constructive or destructive interference. What is uh, positive point of X-ray is they are widely used and they are economical compared to other things, and these are more convenient. So this is the reason why you can see X-ray diffractometers in most of the labs. Okay, so even in most of the universities they have this X-ray diffractometers. Okay, so if you take X-ray diffractometer, any X-ray diffractometer, uh, maybe if it is a tabletop, you can get from 30 lakhs or 35 lakhs. And if you take high-end diffractometers with high temperature, sacks, all those things, it can go up to 1.5 crores. Okay, maybe like 150 lakhs. Okay, or 200 lakhs, based on depending on whatever you are having on the system. Okay, but if you take very basic tabletop X-ray diffractometer, then it will be around 35 lakhs. Okay, it starts from 35 lakhs. It can go again depending on the whatever utilities you have. Okay, so next, this interact with the spatial distribution of valence electrons. Okay, so this is your X-ray diffraction, and if you take the penetration, it is nominal. Nominal means it is not very high or it is not very less. Okay, so the energy is of the order of 10 raised to minus 4 electron volts. Okay, 0.0001 electron volts. Okay, so now if you take the electron diffraction, like your TEM. Okay, TEM, you can again have electron diffraction, which is your EDAX. Okay, so someone was asking if I have a very if I don't know the crystal structure, or if I don't know any information about crystal structure, what you can do is, someone asked whether we can do electron diffraction and get the crystal structure. Yes, you can do it, but the thing is, it is very complicated, in the sense you have to do a lot of experiments. In the sense, when you shine some electron on crystal, if it is a single crystal, then you get only one HKL parameter. Then what you are supposed to do, you have to do again rotation, rotate it, and then again collect a new electron diffraction, and then again you analyze it. So if it is a simple cubic, then you can do it in frame. One frame, in the sense, you just take one electron diffraction pattern, you can solve it. But if it is a tetragonal, then A is equal to B, but it is not equal to C. Then you need at least 2-3 more trials. Okay, and if it is orthorhombic or monoclinic, then you will have more. You have to take more data. Okay, so that is the difficulty with this electron diffraction. So they will diffract from your atoms or molecules. Okay, but only thing is, these are more less compared to your X-ray diffraction. These are less available. Okay, because you cannot have TEM machine in every place, and also to make the TEM measurement, it's not easy. Okay, so you need to be very expertise in that. Okay, in that electron diffraction. Okay, so then when it comes to energy, energy is quite good. Okay, so for you'll have energy from up to 40 electron volts. Okay, so these are the difference between your X-ray and neutron, your electron. And there is something called as neutron diffraction. In neutron diffraction, so as I told, your X-rays can distinguish the atoms, because uh, your atom is having different size, so your X-rays can distinguish the atom. But when it comes to neutron, with neutron are your gamma radiations. If you take the gamma radiations, that means they have more power, more energy. So they can also interact with nucleus. Okay, so if you are using neutrons instead of X-rays, then what happens? You have they can actually interact with nucleus. So you can get scattering from your nucleus, not just the atom, but also from nucleus. So that is how they are different from your X-rays. So in case of your neutron diffraction, you can get atomic structures, how the magnetic field, or how your magnetic ions are arranged in a given uh, material. Okay, so that is how they have little bit higher end. Okay, so these are a little bit higher end. But the problem is, they are not easily available. If you want to do a neutron diffraction experiment, then you have to go to a neutron center. Okay, which is very limited. Okay, I'll show that. Okay, later. So these are very special, and they are very expensive. Very expensive compared to your TEM or XRD. Okay, and they are very rarely available. Means, if you take in India, there is only one neutron diffraction center, which is your BARC, okay, BARC in Bombay. You don't have any other neutron diffraction center. Okay, for entire nation, there is only one neutron center. So now you can get much higher information from your neutron diffraction. Okay, if you do a neutron diffraction. So now this is some of the facilities that I wanted to show. Okay, so there is something also called as synchrotron facility. Synchrotron is nothing but it is high energy X-rays. Okay, so this is again an X-ray, not a neutron, but it's an X-ray, but it is high energy X-rays. So you can do more better. You can do a better experiment, and you can also get more information from this synchrotron compared to X-rays, but not compared to neutron. Okay, neutron is still superior. Okay, so if you see this, there are very few, maybe like some 30, 35 synchrotron facilities. Mostly they are in the Europe or in US. Okay, and there are some in Japan also. Japan they have very good, and South Korea. Okay, South Korea and Japan they have very good facilities. Okay, so this I am going to share with you, so you can see these facilities. Okay, so what and there is only one in India, so Indus, which is in RRCAT, Raja Ramana Center for Advanced Techniques. So I have done some experiments here. Indus 1. So Indus 1 and 2, this is one of the facility which is for synchrotron facility. Okay, so if you have done some X-ray diffraction in your labs, and if you want to study more in depth, then what you do, you can just write a proposal for Indus, which is in your RRCAT. You just log into RRCAT, and then you can see you get you can request for some time. Okay, so they will give you time. You can go there and you can do the experiment yourself. Okay, so for that you should know how to do X-ray diffraction. So I will. This is what you are going to learn in this workshop. Okay, so then there are a lot of other facilities. For example, there is one in Argonne National Lab in the US. So if you want to do some synchrotron facility, what you can do is, again, you go into their website, log into their website. Okay, and then you can submit a proposal. You don't have to go to US. You have to just send your sample to them. There is some special category called as mail in sample. Okay, you have to just mail the samples. Okay, mail in facility. So you nowadays there are a lot of places where you get this. Okay, there are some in South Korea. You can send this mail in. So you just when you write the proposal, that you have to tell them that you are going to submit the proposal for mail-in facility. Okay, mail-in means you send the sample, they will send you the data. Okay, so these are again free facility. Only thing, you need to spend some money to ship your samples. It will be around 750 rupees, or maybe maximum is 1000 rupees. Okay, based on the again the weight of the sample. Okay, so you just send the sample, they will collect the data, they will send you the data, and you are going to learn how to uh, analyze this data. Okay, you can analyze the data yourself. Okay, so these are some of the facilities that you have in all over the world. Okay, so if you again take a number of facilities, it will be around 35 to 50 maximum. Okay, not more than that. Throughout the globe, I'm not talking about India. India is, there is only one. Okay, again the same thing for your neutron facilities. Neutron facility I have put here, so you can just count them. It is countable. Okay, so around 15 to 20 facilities are there. But if you see, most of the things are in Europe. Okay, Europe, they have a large number of neutron facilities. uh, Maybe America few, and in Asia there are some in Japan and Korea. So again I have put our Baba Atomic Research Center, which is in Bombay. Okay, so Bombay, they have this atomic center. uh, they have the neutron facility. So I think the one for diffraction, I think it is called as Dhruva or something like that. So if you just Google Dhruva BARC, then you get to that page. Okay, so these are the neutron facilities. Again, I guess there is NIST, for example, they support the mail-in. Okay, so you can write the proposal. If it goes through, then what you can do is you send your samples. They will collect the data and they will give the data for you. Okay, so these are some of the facilities what you have. Okay, so if it is fine, I think I will stop here. Then I will take some questions. Then again I will continue. So is it fine at this point? So if you have any question, you can. I will take the questions. Uh, okay, so I see one question from Archana Jain. Is X-ray used for body scanning at the airport harmful? So it depends again on the how much time you're exposing. Okay, so X-rays in airport you don't scan body scanning, but maybe there are only few in case of high security. Normally, you don't scan by X-rays. So body scanning again, it is only for few seconds. They won't do for long time. Okay. The same thing for your when you're taking a X-ray in a medical X-ray. Okay. So you just expose it for few seconds. So that is for few minutes or few seconds, it doesn't matter. But you should not exposure for long term. Okay. So if you're doing exposure for long term, then you have harmful. But now right now it's not harmful. Okay. For very less time, it's not harmful. So while dealing with thin film XRD, why we prefer GI XRD? Okay, good. So I will try to answer this at later stage. Okay. I have some data, so I will show you the data. Then I will tell you why you need this GI-XRD, grazing incidence XRD. So I will explain that. So just to remind me later. Okay, when we go deep into our workshop, you can remind me. Okay, if I don't address. So I will make a point. Okay, think GIXRD for thin films. Okay, fine. Then what you have? So what about payment in Indus for synchrotron studies? So as such, if you're getting through the proposal, you don't have to pay anything for performing the experiment. But maybe so when I went, I got 2 days beam time. That means they give me the instrument for 2 days. I can use that instrument for 2 days. So for using the instrument, I don't have to pay. I have to pay only for guest house for my food and guest house. Okay, it will be very nominal. It's not very high. So maybe even the guest house fee it was very less. So and even the food was very less. Even not like 5-star hotel price. Okay, it is very less. So it is fine. So it is not very high. I think around 150 rupees was my food for one day, and I think around I don't remember. So even the guest house fees it was very less. So it is bearable. It's not very high. So okay. So can we briefly explain relevance of Thomson scattering? So scattering again, it itself is just 1.5 hour, uh, 1.5 hour of maybe talk. So I have slides because before joining here, I was doing this kind of things. So I will share the slides for you. Okay? So for this scattering AI SACs, for example, I will share the slides. Okay, slides for SACs. So that itself will explain. So I can that will be fine. Okay. Okay. All shape peaks can be defined as nano or some. So this again I will go in depth. So don't worry. Okay. So peaks shape and peak size I will go in depth. So don't worry about those things. So I'll going to when I'm going to explain you the Scherer equation on all those things. We are going to go in depth. So don't worry about those. I will cover this. So if you have any more questions, uh, I can go, or what I will do is we will take a break. I think it's already a lot of things we have covered. So next I will try to cover in depth. Okay, so in depth we will go in depth. So better we will take a break. So madam, if someone is here, okay, just one more question I will take. Okay, XR uh, free of cost. So I don't know. Maybe I will provide. So I think free of cost is difficult. I don't know. XRD free of cost. IASC some places you can do XRD free of cost, but not the XPS and Raman because already they are very less number of facilities. So okay, why can't we use electron diffraction for different angle? So electron diffraction is very tricky. I think see electron diffraction. You should know what is if it is a single crystal, it's very easy. you may cut, the direction with which you're growing the crystal. So you know so as I told, so if you know the direction, okay, so I think I will go back to that slide. Okay. So if you take this for example, okay, if you take this example, if my crystal is growing in the direction of 110, and if I know this is 110, then it is easy to calculate the d spacing and all those things. But if I don't know much about the crystal direction, then it will be very tedious. So it is not that easy. If you get in one shot, you are lucky, and sometimes you may have to do 10 different electron diffraction. Still you may not solve it. Okay, so it is for me, I'm not an expert in electron diffraction thing. Okay, so electron diffraction is not just like taking a TEM image. Okay, so it is TEM image is just you take some photos, it's fine. But electron diffraction is you take those high resolution scans, and then you have to sit and then you have to find the distance between two parallel planes or parallel lines. So it is not that easy. Then there is one more thing, which is you get the spots. Okay, so you get a spot, and there are some softwares where you put this image, those spots, and then this software you have to play again, and then you have to get different values. Okay, so it is not that itself will be one more one. Okay, are we discussing single crystal and powder XRD? We will discuss more about powder XRD, but I will also touch about single crystal X-ray diffraction. Okay. Yes, this I will cover. I will cover all this. So okay. So I think what additional information one can get from TEM diffraction. So I'm not expert. So still we will see what are the things. Okay. So I think can we stop, madam? If someone is there, I think we'll stop at this point. So we'll take a very brief, maybe 20 minutes break. Then we'll start again.
20 minutes break, sir.
20 minutes. Okay. So not more than that. I think 20 minutes break. We can take 20 minutes break. Again, we will continue from this point. Okay. Is it fine?
Actually, there were 2 more questions in the chat box.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can ask me.
Yeah, one is from Dr. Dhanyai. While dealing with thin film XRD, why we prefer GI XRD?
Yes, I will cover that. I answered that. I will cover that because I have some slides on that. So I'll cover it in next talk. I'll cover it.
Okay,
Next
sir.
question. Next
Then
question.
one question from Dr. Deepa. Yes. So what
Okay.
about the payment in Indus for synchrotron studies? Payment
Yes,
in Indus for synchrotron studies.
yes, I answered already. I answered it.
Okay, sir.
Yes. I think I answered most of them. So still, I'm available. So they can ask later also.
Okay, sir. So
So
shall
I
we
think
join back at 11:50?
yeah, 11:50 we'll join back. Okay, we'll take 20 minutes break and we'll come back.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
So dear, join back at 11:50. The feedback for